Picture this. You are married on a Saturday, and by Monday morning you are standing in someone else's kitchen. The floorboards are cold through your stockings. The stove has already been going for an hour. You are expected to fry eggs, keep the coffee warm, and smile when the men come in from the barn. But when you draw yourself upright, your vision closes at the edges. Your legs tremble as though they have forgotten what they were made for. You tell yourself this is ordinary. You tell yourself a good wife does not make herself heard, and then you hear it again, quiet and firm, a voice that has been with you your whole life. Stay silent. I grew up Old Order Amish in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I married at 19 in a church district where everyone had known everyone else for generations. The lessons I was raised on were the same ones most Amish girls absorb early: work without complaint, speak without sharpness, and do not make yourself conspicuous. I cooked for large families. I cleaned for older couples. I tended other people's babies long before I had any say over my own life. When I describe my first week as a married woman, I am not reconstructing something I half remember. I lived it hour by hour, in a house where my name changed overnight. And there is one part of that week that people who did not grow up plain rarely grasp, even though it explains nearly everything. In my community, a marriage is never only two people. It is two families and a church district woven together into something larger than any individual inside it. The Ordnung does not enumerate every expectation in writing, but the central one is unmistakable: a wife yields. We had a word for this in our community, Gelassenheit, which means the surrender of your own will, the setting aside of the self. I heard that word so many times growing up that it had the force of something carved rather than spoken. There was also an expectation around silence that operated just as powerfully. You did not speak about the body. You did not speak about difficulties in a marriage. You did not speak about what happened behind a bedroom door. Women who did were called dirty-minded or ungrateful. This silence was taught to us as modesty. It did not feel like modesty to me. The bishop and the ministers taught that a home must have order. The husband leads, and the wife upholds what he leads. A wife who struggles is counseled to pray more, work harder, and wait with patience. This is passed down between women as well, not because those women are unkind, but because it is how they learned to survive what they were given. When something goes wrong, you do not bring it into the open. You go to family first. If it grows too large to contain there, you go to the bishop. Medical care is not forbidden, but many families delay it, and the delay is not always rooted in distrust of doctors. Often it is rooted in the fear of what it would mean to need one. I did not understand how dangerous that delay could become until the week I am about to describe. My wedding was in late May. The air was already warm and the fields had gone soft and green. I woke before first light to get ready. My mother's hands were steady as she pinned my hair and settled my cap. She smelled of lye soap and the lilacs growing in the yard. At the church service, I sat among the women with my heart moving too fast. The sermon ran long, the way they often do. I remember the bishop saying that marriage is a school for the soul, and watching everyone around me nod as though this were a comfort. Afterward, there was food and an enormous quantity of dishes, and I smiled until the muscles in my jaw ached. I tried to hold the composed expression I had seen on the faces of older married women. Inside, I felt like someone standing at the edge of an examination she had never been given the chance to study for. That evening, my husband Aaron drove the buggy home in silence. He was 21, not a bad man, simply young and thoroughly confident that the way we had always done things was correct. I listened to the harness rings and the steady sound of the horse breathing in the dark. By the following morning, I was in his family's dawdy house on the farm, 2 rooms below and 2 above, with the windows open and the sound of cattle drifting in from the barn. My mother-in-law Mary was already moving through the house with the precision of someone who has not wasted a motion in decades. She said I could start by heating water because in this house they washed up properly. I nodded. I filled the kettle and lifted it to the stove. When I bent to set it down, a deep pain moved through my lower belly, not sharp, but heavy, like something pulling from the inside. I told myself it was the strangeness of the new place. I told myself every new bride feels unsettled. By midday on Monday, I was at the table chopping potatoes, and the knife felt wrong in my hand. My hands had gone cold. When I stood to stir the pot, my knees loosened without warning, and I grabbed the edge of the counter hard enough to leave marks in the flour dust along the surface. Mary looked at me and said I had gone pale. I told her I was fine. She gave a small smile that held no warmth in it and said, "The first week is always hard, to stay busy, that it passes." That evening I moved through setting the table and clearing it with careful attention to how long I remained seated, because in that house sitting read as laziness. When Aaron came in from chores, tired and hungry, he kissed my forehead in the way of someone completing an item on a list, and then he said his mother had mentioned I looked sick. I heard myself answer that I was only tired. Inside, I was saying something else entirely. Please ask me again. Please look at me again. Tuesday, I woke before light with the quilt damp beneath me. The room shifted when I stood. I held the bedpost and waited for the floor to settle. My body felt like it was keeping something from me. Downstairs, Mary was working bread dough, the rhythm of her hands against it steady and certain. She glanced at me once and told me I needed to eat more. I tried. Every bite sat heavily. By Tuesday afternoon, I had begun seeing small dark spots at the edges of my vision when I walked. I was carrying a bucket from the pump when my arms started shaking, and I set it down too abruptly, and water went over the rim and across the ground. I stood looking at the spill as though it confirmed something I had been afraid to name. Mary came outside and saw the water. She did not raise her voice, which somehow made it worse. She said, "Naomi, don't be dramatic. Women have always done this work." I said quietly that I did not feel right. She glanced past me toward the yard as though checking whether anyone else could hear, and then she said, "We don't speak about those things. You rest when you find a moment and you keep quiet about it. Do you understand?" I nodded, because I had been taught since childhood that nodding was the correct response. By Wednesday, I was beginning to wonder whether I would get through the week at all. The morning was hot, and the kitchen felt like it was pressing in. I was washing dishes in a pan and the smell of soap and grease lifted off the water and turned my stomach. I leaned over the sink and swallowed and kept swallowing. My wet hands trembled against the edge. I told myself to count the plates. I told myself that was how you got through. One thing at a time, no looking ahead. Aaron came in at noon, looked at the food, said it was good, and then looked at me and asked why I was sitting down. I had not noticed myself sitting. My legs had made the decision without consulting me. I told him I had gotten dizzy. He frowned in a way that suggested he was sorting through what to do with this information, and then he said his mother had told him it was normal, and I shouldn't worry her. Don't worry her. That was another rule I had not known I had inherited. That evening he offered to ask the bishop's wife to come and talk with me. He meant it as a form of help, but my stomach tightened at the thought. Talking to the bishop's wife was not the same as being cared for. It was advice that would arrive, regardless of the question, at the same destination. Be patient, be obedient, be grateful for what you have. Thursday. I woke with a fever. I had no thermometer, but I could feel it in the way my skin moved between burning and cold, in the dryness of my mouth, in the way my legs gave at the stove when I tried to stand my full height. I said to Mary that I thought I needed to see a doctor. She stopped what she was doing. She wiped her hands on her apron with the deliberateness of someone choosing her next words carefully. She said they did not run to the English for every small discomfort. I told her it was not a small discomfort. Her eyes narrowed. She said, "Naomi, you are a wife now. This is private. You do not go telling people your body's business." I wanted to say it is my body. I wanted to say I am frightened. I washed my face instead and went back to work. By Friday I was moving with the caution of someone much older, measuring each step, placing my hands within reach of something solid. The house was quiet except for the clock and the stove, and the quiet had a weight to it. Every sound I made seemed too large for the room. That afternoon I was upstairs folding laundry when my ears began to ring. I sat down on the edge of the bed and worked on breathing evenly. My heart was running as though I had been moving fast, though I had been still. I said aloud, to no one, "Something is wrong." The room did not answer. Of course it did not. Saturday arrived. 1 week after the wedding. People would stop us and ask how married life was treating me, and they expected a soft smile and a modest answer. That morning Mary announced we were going to Aaron's grandparents for supper. I tried to dress and my hands shook the entire time. When Aaron brought the horse around and I stepped off the porch, my knees folded. I caught the railing. My stomach seized and I tasted something bitter. Aaron looked at me, annoyed first, then uncertain. He asked what was going on with me. I wanted to tell him everything. The pain that had been in my body since the first morning. The weakness that had grown worse each day. The fear that had been sitting in my chest since Tuesday. But I could still hear Mary's voice from the yard. Stay silent. So I said the smallest version of the truth that I could manage. I told him I could not stand. He stared at me as though I had said something in a language he did not recognize. Mary appeared in the doorway and said not to start trouble on a Saturday, and that was the moment something clarified itself for me. If I kept listening to them, I would fall down in that yard and call it faithfulness. We were still in the yard when I spoke again. My voice was small, but it did not waver. I said, Aaron, I need help today, not tomorrow. Today. He opened his mouth and then closed it. He looked at his mother. He looked back at me. I held the porch rail because my hands had gone numb and my legs felt like something coming apart slowly. I said, I am not performing. I am scared. Mary began to say something. Aaron spoke over her. He said we would go to Daniel's, a neighbor who sometimes worked alongside Englishmen and had a telephone. We drove there in silence, every rut in the road sending a jolt of pain through my abdomen. I held my apron bunched in my fist and counted fence posts to keep myself present. At Daniel's house, Aaron used the phone with the stiffness of someone handling something he did not entirely trust. He reached a clinic in town. An English nurse asked questions in a quick, direct way. Aaron looked at me without knowing what to say. I answered for myself. Weak, fever, dizzy, pain in my belly. She told us to come in immediately. I sat in that clinic chair under lights that were brighter than anything in the dawdy house, and the feeling that moved through me was stronger than the fear that had been living in me all week. It was relief. Because for the first time in 7 days, someone received my words as though they described something real and worth attending to. That day did not end my marriage. What it ended was the particular story I had been handed about what silence meant and what it was for. I understand now why the women around me told me to stay quiet. They had received the same instructions. Many of them had worked through pain that no one ever addressed. Endurance had become a form of dignity, even when no one gave it that name. And there are genuine things in the Amish way of life that I do not dismiss. It holds families together. It keeps work connected to something meaningful. It protects people from a certain kind of rootlessness that the outside world produces in abundance. I saw real tenderness between older couples who had built something together over decades, and I still respect what that steadiness requires. But a way of life can shelter people in one place and expose them in another. When silence is elevated to something sacred, a woman's body becomes easy to overlook. When obedience is the first answer to every question, ordinary care can be postponed until it becomes something more serious. When shame is the mechanism used to keep private things private, a small illness can be allowed to grow in the dark into something that did not have to become dangerous. I do not hold every person from that week responsible for what happened. What I hold responsible is the teaching that told me my voice was a disruption to be managed rather than a signal worth hearing. Some lessons do not reveal themselves as harm until the moment you try to speak and discover how long you have been afraid to. Have you ever been told to stay quiet in a moment when you needed someone to hear you? If you feel ready to say so, bring it into the comments. Quiet stories still deserve witnesses. They always did.